How's that? How's everyone doing? I'm Kris. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do Epic History TV, Napoleon Endgame, France, 1814. If you're keeping up, Napoleon has, it was just the Battle of the Nations, and he just flooded back to France. That's how they say it. France. So, we're going to see what happens. Today is Thursday, 30th, June 30th. It's been today's 10-year anniversary of my mother passing. So what I'm about to do is not, it's going to come out wrong, isn't it? I'm not about to crack open a can of beer, a can of orange hard soda because of her. No. It's terrible. Why would you think that? You thought that because I inferred that, but I didn't. So I'm going to go ahead and pour it in here. Oh, look at this. Oh, it's like a alcoholic Fanta. Oh, look at that. Set that aside, let it stop fizzing. It's a good day. Again, not the 10-year anniversary. That's sad. It's a good day today because I did a job. It was a state job. And it was prevailing wages, which means I would sit here on my wage scale as to what I would make doing this job, and I had to do 2 glue down balconies at this facility. And normally we would charge, and this is where I'd be, well, because it was a state job, subcontractors, contractors, union, blah, blah, blah. The state pays way up here. Like my thumb is pointing up to where the wages would be, and this is where I would be, which means that by state law I cannot make this money. I have to make that money, that hourly wage that they pay. And normally in my 8-hour day I make X amount of dollars. Well, today my daily pay, my daily salary would have been reached at 2.5 hours of working with this place. I was there for 6 hours 45 minutes. It was a very good day. It was an easy day. It was nice. The only bad thing was I was working, I did 2 balconies, and then I called and said, hey, I'm done. And they were like, well, we got a third one if you want to do it. I was like, bring it over. So they brought it over, and I knocked out 3, and then I go back tomorrow to do 2 more. But I was like, yep, no, I'll do it. I don't have a problem with it. And they were like, all right, well, if you have time, you can do that third. Oh, I got there at 8:15, and I gave them a call at 10:45 and was like, come on, bring it on out to me. So we're going to toast to a good day today. Oh, my gosh. Oh, my goodness, it's so good. Oh, we got to pour that. We got to top the rest of that nice. So, don't mind that. So tomorrow I go back there, and I got 2 more, but the people are going to be there. It's like a living community. And I got to go back and do 2 more. And man, it's so easy. You're out in the sun though. Sometimes, like the first one, the very first one, I was up on the 6th floor doing a balcony, and fortunately it's concrete balcony, because if I could see through it I wouldn't have been a happy person. I'm not a fan of heights. So I was doing the 6th floor, and the first one was like ugh, because the sun was just pumping right in there. And then I went and did another one on the 6th floor, and it was on the other side of the building, so I had shade. It was nice. And then I had to go up to a 10th floor for the 3rd one, and I was in the shade on that one. But yeah, the 10th floor, oof, that was brutal. I was sweeping, and then I got hit with a little gust of wind, and it kind of moved me a little bit, and I put my hand on the deck, and I kind of looked over and looked down, and I leaned back, and I got that shooting, tingling sensation in my toes, and I was like, well, that was stupid. Why would you do that? That was completely dumb. Then all I thought of the whole time was, what if the building collapsed? That's not what you want to have running through your mind. And I started thinking, I was getting in the elevator, I was like, what if the rope snaps? It got very dark in that elevator because I had to keep going up and down, and it was making all kinds of sounds. And I was checking to see, when was the last time this thing was looked at? All right, it says it's good until April 2023. I don't know. So, fortunately, they have 2 elevators. So if I go down on one of them, the other one still can function. So let's all think good about that. So anyways, sorry for this long-winded thing, but it was a good day. Sad day, 10th anniversary of my mom passing. But, hey, what am I going to do? Can't mourn forever. Well, you could, and you do. I'm not trying to say it's an easy thing. It does take time. Time heals wounds, but actually it just makes you forget things. Makes you forget the sound of their voice. Makes you forget looking at their face. It kind of removes things from your brain. At least for me, it removes things and it makes it more difficult, which I think is what makes it easier. But it makes it sadder because it makes it more difficult because you can't remember things. I can hear her voice. I close my eyes, I can hear her voice, but I can't see her face. But if I see her face, I can't imagine her voice. Maybe that just means that I have things that I still have to work out. I don't know. But anyways, this isn't about that. This is about Napoleon and my alcoholic Fanta stuff. So let's get on with the video. And go.
In October 1813, Napoleon had suffered his heaviest ever defeat at Leipzig, the Battle of the Nations. Surviving French forces, exhausted, sick and demoralized, retreated to the River Rhine.
Sorry, my fiber optics needs to catch up, so I'm going to give it a pause for a second and just randomly talk about how this delicious non-sponsored alcoholic drink is. You ever open up a thing of alcohol and then put it in your mouth and then taking a drink and been like, that was delicious, and then you do it again? Sure you have. Watch. Oh my God, it's so good. Oh, it's so good. I got another one here just in case. Here's, get my hand out of the way. Bud Light Seltzer Hard Soda, Citrus Soda, 5% alcohol. Oh, nope, that's 100 calories. 5% alcohol, zero sugar, 100 calories. Oh, look, it's got malted rice is in it. So that's, if you're allergic to rice or yellow number 5 or natural flavors or water, you probably don't want this. So let's see now if it's caught up. Probably won't. It's going to need to spin, but I'm just trying to give it some time. Oh, there it goes. Maybe.
And prepared to defend France from invasion.
Oh, I love you so
but
much.
In November, the armies of the Sixth Coalition paused their advance, and Austrian Foreign Minister Metternich offered peace terms.
Oh, okay.
The Frankfurt proposals would allow Napoleon to keep his throne if France returned to her so-called natural frontiers. It was the best offer Napoleon was likely to get, now that his back was to the wall, and all Europe's great powers were united against him. Even so, he did not accept the terms. He merely agreed to reopen negotiations.
I have a stupid question. And is it power or is it greed? What causes someone to have had so much success creating, in war, to expand so far, and then start to get your ass kicked and start to suck back in? What is it? Is it just the loss of the failure? Is it the scrutiny you're going to take at home? Like, what makes someone not willing to just negotiate? Like, you know what? Yeah, all right, this is the best. It's the best thing for me. It's the best thing for my country. and let's just try to kind of focus on us, make friends, and see what happens. What is, and I understand that this isn't over because there's still 1815, so I know he pretty much loses it at Waterloo, but it's just arrogance. Like, what's so difficult about that? I'm not in that situation, so to me it just seems like, yeah, okay, they're letting me off easy. But I just can't comprehend what it is about someone. But if I'm in that situation, I can't say that I would be any different. Maybe I would always be thinking, just one more battle. One more battle's all we need. We can turn it. We can knock them on their heels. And it's... Sorry, just had to ask.
To the Allies, and many in France itself, it proved that Napoleon would not listen to reason.
Yeah.
The war went on, and by January 1814, Napoleon's situation looked even worse. Many of his besieged garrisons in the east were starved into surrender. Marshal Davout, with 34,000 men in Hamburg, was now besieged. Denmark, one of France's last allies, was invaded by Bernadotte's Swedish army and made to join the coalition. French troops evacuated the Netherlands, which reasserted its independence after nearly 20 years of French control. In Italy, Eugene's army faced a new enemy, Joachim Murat, King of Naples, now marching north with 30,000 men to honour his new alliance with the Sixth Coalition.
Everyone's turning.
In Paris, Napoleon responded to the crisis with a series of extreme measures. Property taxes doubled, state salaries and pensions suspended, 300,000 new conscripts called up, from a country already exhausted by 20 years of war. He ordered the release of Pope Pius, under French house arrest for the last 5 years, to try to shore up his support in Italy. He even agreed to release Fernando, the Bourbon King of Spain, to take up his throne in exchange for peace between France and Spain, a condition that Fernando was in no position to honour. But these concessions...
Yeah, I wouldn't have honored. I mean, I would have been like, you know what? Yeah, totally. Then once I crossed into Spain, I'd have been like, screw that guy. He wanted me to do all this. I did it. Then he took the throne away from me. You can't trust this guy. He's not worthy of being trusted. No, hell no.
were too little, far too late.
Yep.
In January, 2 coalition armies crossed the Rhine into France. Blücher's army of Silesia and Schwarzenberg's army of Bohemia. Outnumbered French forces in their path could only fall back. On the 25th of January, Napoleon said farewell to his wife and son at the Tuileries Palace, before leaving for the front. He would never see either of them again.
Oh, wow.
With just 70,000 men...
were his wife and kids, or kid, were they ever a target by the French people? Like, because of maybe their eventual hatred of Napoleon? Did they ever maybe target his family? Or did any of the other militaries, or was it because there was a woman and a child they weren't going to? Just a side question.
He faced odds of 4-1. Most of his troops were raw conscripts, some without uniforms, many just learning how to hold a musket.
Oh, so good.
But for the first time in years, Napoleon's army was so small that he'd be able to exercise direct command over all its movements.
I like that painting.
The result would be one of the most audacious and brilliant campaigns in history. Imagine Napoleon waging war in the 20th century. His cavalry replaced by armoured vehicles, cannon by attack helicopters. sponsoring this video.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
The battle for France would be fought east of Paris, mostly across Champagne, a flat region divided by the rivers.
I'm going to answer my own question that I asked earlier, and I'm sorry again for pausing. The reason why he would not give up or not surrender has nothing to do with ego. It's because, I'm going to say, earlier in one of the previous videos, I think it was a Battle of Nations or something like that, where they started formulating the go at Napoleon, or and get him to come down, and then they would attack his second in command. So Napoleon would rush up there, and then this other group would circle back around and attack the second command. So they kept taking out all the underlings, I'll say. And I think that with him in charge, he had confidence, obviously, in himself and in his ability to wage war. Maybe not so much on the others. So if they were going to cross, they were going to have to face him. And I think that he knew that, and in some way they knew that. And they might not have had that much confidence individually, maybe collectively. If they all got together, they probably thought we could all beat him. But did the others really feel that confident having this person on their side and this person on their side? I don't know. Because, imagine it's a sport. And I hate to make this analogy, but imagine that's a sport, and you are playing. If it's soccer, or I'm sorry, football. That's a guy who scores, and he makes you look stupid, and he's going to drive past you. If it's football, it's a hard-hitting linebacker or safety, somebody who's going to be in. That was Lawrence Taylor / Dick Butkus / Ray Lewis / you could throw in Urlacher / Jack Tatum / you know what I mean? Like he was that for American people. He was that nasty, intimidating force. So I bet you that's why he knew that they were in trouble. Because now if they wanted to come into France, they had to face him. And he had that. Now he's also in his own backyard. I apologize, it's a long video, I'm making it longer, but it's the alcohol, it's making me happy.
Marne and Seine and their tributaries. In late January, fields were dusted with snow, and roads quickly turned to mud. Napoleon learned that the coalition armies were widely scattered, with part of Blücher's army near Napoleon's old college at Brienne. The emperor advanced rapidly, hoping to trap and destroy part of Blücher's army. But after a hard day's fighting that cost both sides 3,000 casualties, Blücher was able to retreat towards Schwarzenberg's army. That evening, Napoleon was nearly skewered by a charging Cossack, saved only by General Gorgo's good shooting. As Napoleon tried to work out the enemy's movements, Blücher, heavily reinforced by Schwarzenberg, made a surprise attack at La Rothière. Allied troops advanced through swirling snow to assault the village, defiantly held by young French conscripts. One was so inexperienced that Marshal Marmont had to personally show him how to load his musket during the battle. By late afternoon, Wreder's Bavarian Corps was falling on Napoleon's flank. Heavily outnumbered, Napoleon had no option but to retreat, having lost 5,000 casualties and 73 guns abandoned in the thick mud. The Allies' frontal attacks meant their losses were greater, but by combining their armies, they defeated Napoleon on French soil for the first time. Believing Napoleon would now retreat towards Paris, the Allies decided to advance along two routes to ease pressure on the roads. Blücher would take a northern route along the Marne. Schwarzenberg would follow the Seine. But dividing their armies again would play right into Napoleon's hands.
Wellington was pretty good.
After 2 days to reorganize, Napoleon continued his retreat to Nogent, where he learned that the Allies had split their armies. Not only that, they were advancing at different speeds. The aggressive Blücher racing ahead, while the more cautious Schwarzenberg lagged behind. Leaving Oudinot and Victor to guard the Seine bridges and delay Schwarzenberg, Napoleon raced north through mud and rain with 30,000 men. The army of Silesia was strung out on the march, oblivious to the danger it was in. First, Napoleon fell on General Osufiev's Russian 9th Corps at Champaubert, destroying it, taking its commander and 2,000 men prisoner. The next morning, he marched on General Osten-Sacken's force near Montmiral. This was a much larger force, with 2 infantry and 1 cavalry corps, and was expecting support from York's Prussian 1st Corps. But the Prussians were late, and Sacken's troops could not withstand the French onslaught. At this desperate hour, the Emperor's elite Old Guard were no longer held back, but were often thrown into the thick of the fighting. By the end of the day, Napoleon had inflicted another 3,500 casualties, twice his own losses, and the Allies were in rapid retreat. Napoleon had ordered Marshal MacDonald to cut off the enemy's escape by seizing the Marne Bridge at Château-Thierry. But York's Prussians got there first. The next day, Napoleon could only batter their rear guard as the enemy fled across the Marne, destroying the bridge behind them. Sending Marshal Mortier to rebuild the bridge and continue the pursuit, Napoleon doubled back to rejoin Marmont, who had been left to keep watch on Blücher. Napoleon attacked at Vauchamp, using General Grouchy's cavalry to outflank Blücher's army, which was soon in headlong retreat. A merciless French pursuit inflicted 6,000 Prussian and Russian casualties. Napoleon lost just 600 men. Napoleon had taken on an enemy army almost twice his size, and beaten it 4 times in just 6 days. Blücher had lost an estimated 15,000 casualties in battle, and another 15,000 in smaller engagements, as stragglers or deserters. For now, the army of Silesia had been scattered and neutralized. But in the south, Marshals Victor and Oudinot had not been able to prevent Schwarzenberg's army of Bohemia from crossing the Seine in 3 places. Austrian troops were now just 40 miles from Paris. Leaving Mortier and Marmont to keep watch on Blücher, Napoleon raced south. Schwarzenberg, alarmed by news of Blücher's defeat and of Napoleon's approach, immediately ordered a retreat. It was too late for Wittgenstein's advance guard, routed at Montmain with 2,000 casualties.
Napoleon's men have to be pretty tired right now, right? I mean, they raced north, they fought everyone, and came around.
Napoleon sent Victor's 2nd Corps to seize the bridge at Montereau, but was so infuriated by its slow progress that he sacked Victor and gave his corps to General Gérard. The next day, at the Battle of Montereau, the French drove the Allied Württemberg Corps back across the river, with 30% losses. According to some accounts, the Emperor sighted the French cannon himself, as he had at Lodi 18 years before. Napoleon had the Allies on the run. But how long could it last?
Today, I would like to show you 70 ingenious projects I built around my house that you can easily replicate on your own property.
Show me.
In fact, what I want to do over the next few minutes is...
Oh no, it must have been an error. Sometimes when I get a little alcohol in me, I read a little bit slower, and I have to make sure I'm understanding what I'm reading. My apologies.
Even as fighting continued, negotiations between France and the coalition reopened at Châtillon-sur-Seine on the 5th of February. The Allied terms were now more severe. A return to France's frontiers of 1791, which meant the additional loss of Belgium, a humiliation that Napoleon refused to accept. Instead, he tried to revive the Frankfurt proposals, hoping to play for time and to split the coalition, whose war aims varied from Britain's hard line to Austria's more ambiguous position. But this hope was thwarted by British Foreign Secretary Lord Castlereagh. On the 1st of March, he persuaded the Allies to sign the Treaty of Chaumont. In it, Russia, Prussia, Austria and Great Britain agreed to keep 150,000 troops in the field and not to negotiate separately with France, while Britain added the sweetener of a £5 million subsidy to be shared among the Allies. The treaty's secret articles specified common war aims, including the future independence of the German states, Switzerland and Italy, while Spain was to be returned to the Bourbons and Holland to the House of Orange. The four powers even agreed that once they'd defeated Napoleon, they'd form a 20-year defensive alliance to maintain peace in Europe, a sign of their newfound commitment to each other.
That's good, though.
A split in the coalition had been Napoleon's last, best hope for a favourable peace. That was gone. And news from across the country was bleak. French cities were surrendering to the Allies without a fight. Nancy, Dijon and Mâcon had all fallen. In the south, Wellington defeated Marshal Soult at Orthez, forcing him to fall back on Toulouse. 2 weeks later, as British troops approached the city of Bordeaux, it declared loyalty to France's Bourbon kings. The mayor himself rode out to greet the British, bearing a white cockade, the sign of Bourbon allegiance. Napoleon's hope for a nation in arms to resist the Allies had not materialized. Allied troops, particularly Cossacks, often robbed French civilians and committed some atrocities. French peasants took revenge when they could, but there was no guerrilla war to mirror what French troops had encountered in Spain or Russia. The chief desire among ordinary French people was for peace, at almost any price.
Dangers crowded upon him, encompassed him, and pressed him from the side when he sought to escape from them, by misrepresenting them to himself. Oh.
Any talk of Napoleon's defeat in late February was premature. The French Emperor was driving Schwarzenberg's army of Bohemia before him, even though it was twice his size. But Schwarzenberg scrambled to safety behind the River Aube. Napoleon knew he had to land another decisive blow soon, so turned his attention back to Blücher. After an aborted attempt to join forces with Schwarzenberg, Blücher had decided to resume his advance on Paris, gathering reinforcements en route, and with only Marmont and Mortier's weak corps to oppose him. Leaving Marshal MacDonald in command in the south, Napoleon set off to intercept Blücher, covering 60 miles in 3 days along terrible roads choked with mud. At Napoleon's approach, Blücher retreated across the Marne, burning the bridges behind him. 24 hours.
They really were scared of him, and he knew that. I take no, not scared. They were intimidated, and they didn't. Maybe it was scared. I don't think they felt they could really win against him, like one-on-one, unless they had outrageous superior numbers. But of course, even when he beat them when they had double. So.
Hours later, they'd been rebuilt by French engineers, and Napoleon was poised to crush Blücher against the Aisne River, because the major crossing point at Soissons was held by a Franco-Polish garrison. But after just a day's fighting, the garrison commander at Soissons tamely surrendered, allowing Blücher to escape. Napoleon continued his pursuit across the Aisne, still hoping to cut off the army of Silesia. But at Craon, he encountered Russian troops in a strong defensive position. The Russians fought stubbornly. The French finally forced the enemy to withdraw, but only at the cost of 6,000 casualties, including many irreplaceable veterans from Napoleon's guard. Napoleon pushed on to Laon. But by now, Blücher had concentrated his forces, 98,000 troops in all, and outnumbered Napoleon 2-1. French attacks were repulsed, while Marmont's corps was caught off guard by a late Allied counterattack and routed. Napoleon was lucky to avoid a much heavier defeat. Blücher, usually aggressive to the point of recklessness, was unwell and had been told Napoleon's army was twice as big as it was, leading him to act with unusual caution. Laon was a heavy blow to Napoleon. 6,500 casualties he could not afford. Undaunted, he fell back to Soissons, and after a brief moment to reorganize, he marched on the city of Reims, which had just fallen to Saint-Priest's Russian corps. In a whirlwind assault, Napoleon retook the city. Saint-Priest himself was mortally wounded, his corps routed. Meanwhile, in the south, Schwarzenberg had resumed his offensive as soon as he found out Napoleon had gone north. In heavy fighting, he'd driven Oudinot and MacDonald back from the River Aube. 5 days later, the Allies had recaptured Troyes, as MacDonald retreated behind the River Seine. Now, after 4 days to rest and reorganize his battered army, Napoleon was coming south once more. Schwarzenberg, emboldened by news of Napoleon's defeat at Laon, decided that this time he would stand and fight.
Okay.
Napoleon advanced on Arcis-sur-Aube, ignoring reports that the enemy was not.
I will say this. They have Napoleon running all over the damn country, fighting people. Maybe that's something they're looking at, eventually figuring he can't run all over forever.
Not retreating, as he believed, but gathering for battle. As heavy fighting broke out, Napoleon still believed he faced only the enemy rearguard. It was a nasty surprise to discover that he faced the entire might of the army of Bohemia. 28,000 men against 80,000. In desperate fighting, Napoleon personally rallied fleeing troops and exposed himself to enemy fire, having his horse killed under him by an exploding shell. But the odds were too great. At the end of the second day, Napoleon was forced to order the retreat.
Hi, I'm Lucas. I work the social media side of YRM, and we get comments from dozens of people every day. The most common things I hear are geared towards a lack of proper worship. Things like, my congregation doesn't keep the Sabbath.
Yeah, sorry, bro. It's too bad. Do you think, in the end, Napoleon would have wanted to die fighting for his country than to... Well, this is a stupid question. Of course, he would rather have died fighting for the country to have been a martyr than to have been eventually kicked out. That's not the word. Exiled. That was a stupid question. I'm gonna. I apologize to the foreign viewers. Sorry. George Washington, American president, and Revolution, Washington D.C. named after him. All that garbage. Hear me out. There was a battle. I think it was the battle with Charles Lee was the head of it. Charles Lee was a guy who was just a garbage human being. He was a backstabber. That's why I call him a garbage human being. He wanted to take over. He wanted to make Washington look bad. He was also a coward, so he led a group out, and then they quickly retreated. Washington and there was a couple other names. Was Benjamin Talmadge in that? And maybe Hamilton? I don't remember. But they showed up. They saw all these soldiers retreating. And they saw Charles Lee retreating. And they were like, what the hell are you doing? And he's like, we were overpowered. Washington rallied up everyone. Got them back onto the field to fight. And, excuse me, in the midst of the fighting, Washington got on the field, sword in hand, and he's barking out orders. Fire here, fire there, do this, do that. Shots are whizzing by, and his coat was pierced. I think his horse might have been shot out from underneath him, just like this. And he had made a comment. I don't know if it was after this or leading up to it, where he was so fed up with the way things were going, he would have been happy to have been killed, because he felt that to have been killed on that battlefield, turning the men around, getting them to fight for him, would have been a better end than what he thought was coming, which was eventually the British winning. And how different would the U.S. be? I don't think we would be the U.S. We might be the U.S. in terms of how Canada is Canada. And it's not an offense to Canada. It's just Canadian independence didn't happen until like the 1980s, I believe. I was corrected on this once before. I have Canadian viewers, so please chime in if I'm incorrect. But Canada has... I understand Canada was under the British rule, but they've never seemed to me to be a British country, because they speak French, they speak British, they speak English. They've always kind of been their own country to me. I've never viewed them as anything other than just Canada. And I want to go there. I really want to go to Canada. I think that'd be awesome. I've been to Mexico twice. Been to the Canadian side of Niagara Falls once, but I really want to just go to Canada. But that's a side point. But I think that getting back to Washington. I'm sorry, getting back to Canada. Canada's always been the country. I've never viewed them as anything different. So I think that America would kind of be on par with that in terms of we would be an independent country by now. Maybe sooner than Canada because we're a little more aggressive. We're more dicks at times. But we are also very charitable, and you know, we're good and bad. I'm not trying to brag about us, but I think that we would be our own independent country, but I don't know that we would be the country we are today if we were still under that British rule. But I think we might have actually had some say in British Parliament. No, actually, no, we wouldn't have. I take that back. Anyways, let's get back to the video. I apologize. I'm running low on alcohol, so I'm going to need a new drink soon. So I've got 12 minutes to enjoy this.
Napoleon believed his army was now too weak to take on the Allies directly. So he decided to change strategy. He would march into the rear of the Allied armies, join up with some of his isolated garrisons, and cut the enemy's lines of communication, forcing them to abandon their...
Sorry. We're going to have to take a quick commercial break, because I'm not going to wait for this video to end before I get a drink. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to close the camera, and I'm just going to hum for you. I can't even hear what I'm saying right now. Do 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 My dogs hear me doing that, and they think it's like some kind of enjoyment for them. So I'm gonna go ahead and crack open a classic cola. Oh, it's not open yet, but I almost just dropped it. Was it the alcohol? Of course it was. I feel good right now. I think I'm only gonna drink about a 6-pack tonight. I'm an alcoholic. That's not true. Oh, listen to that sound. All right. I apologize. Let's get back into the video.
And cut the enemy's lines of communication, forcing them to abandon their advance on Paris. But the Allies, until now always one step behind Napoleon, had just received crucial information. Talleyrand, the most brilliant French diplomat of the age, and the most slippery. He'd served France's monarchy, the Revolution, then Napoleon, until in 1807 he fell out irrevocably with the Emperor over foreign policy. He now believed that Napoleon was dragging France into ruin, and worked behind the scenes to ensure his downfall. From Paris, he wrote to the Russian Emperor Alexander at Allied headquarters, informing him that in the capital, support for Napoleon was crumbling, and the city's defences had been completely neglected. He urged the Allies to march immediately on Paris, without allowing Napoleon to distract them.
Would you deem this guy, knowing what we know now, or, okay, knowing what we know now, I view that guy as kind of a patriot, or he just kind of wants a tyrant out, because I view Napoleon as not a great, he was the best military guy. But, you know, leader of a country, kind of a dick. Not the best. what do you view him as? Is he a patriot, or is he kind of a shouldn't have done it? Because I could see both sides. I view him as a guy who really loves his country, so he's willing to sacrifice Napoleon, and maybe from there be able to get his country back and then reform and be better. Because with a guy like Napoleon in the way, he just seems like a guy who wants to fight. He needs to fight. He's addicted to fighting.
Talleyrand's information was confirmed when the Allies intercepted a report from Napoleon's chief of police, General Savary, meant for the Emperor. The treasury, arsenals and powder stores are empty. We are completely at the end of our resources. The population is discouraged and discontented, wishing peace at any price.
I feel bad
As
for the
Napoleon
people.
advanced,
I feel bad for the people of Paris at that time, because you're just done, and this guy won't give up. And then when something like this happens, he pulls more people into the fight, and you have no say.
on Saint-Dizier, the Allies sent General Witzengerode and 10,000 cavalry to harass his army and to screen their own movements. Then began their march on Paris. At Fère-Champenoise, they collided with Marmont and Mortier's corps, advancing to join Napoleon. An entire National Guard division, 5,000 men, was virtually wiped out as the marshals suffered a crushing defeat. Napoleon feared that the fall of Paris would be a fatal blow to his regime. His political authority and ability to wage war might not recover. So, when he received news of the Allies' movements, he tore up his plans and ordered a forced march back to Paris, intending to lead its defense in person. Napoleon's wife and son were evacuated from the capital, along with most of his ministers. His brother, Joseph, the ex-king of Spain, was in charge of the city's defences, but had done little. Paris was awash with rumours of treachery and defeat. Marmont and Mortier were able to reach Paris before the Allies, adding their troops to the garrison. It now totaled 37,000 men, including some hardened veterans of the Guard, but many more young conscripts, while a third were part-time soldiers of the National Guard. The Allies had 120,000 seasoned troops outside the city, and given the urgency of taking Paris before Napoleon could intervene, their elite guards and grenadier divisions would lead the way.
You can't afford a siege at that moment. If you're trying to get in there, you got to just get in there, because I think they feared Napoleon. They were intimidated by him, and they just wanted to get, if they could get Paris, then I think they think he's done. Maybe.
On the 30th of March, they began their assault from the north. Heavy fighting raged throughout the day. The city's defenders fought bravely, inflicting several thousand casualties on the advancing enemy. But defeat was inevitable. That night, to save Paris from destruction, Marshal Marmont agreed to surrender the city, on condition the garrison was permitted to leave with its weapons. At the Hôtel des Invalides, the 71-year-old Marshal Serrurier oversaw the burning of 1,400 flags and standards captured from France's enemies, as well as Frederick the Great's sword and sash, so they would not fall into Allied hands. Napoleon was just 15 miles from Paris when he was informed of the city's surrender. He sat with his head in his hands for 15 minutes.
Moscow, that's right.
On the 31st of March 1814, France's enemies marched into Paris for the first time since the 100 Years' War. Parisian crowds cheered the three Allied monarchs, bringers of peace. Everyone in Paris was suddenly a royalist once more. Above all, they cheered for Emperor Alexander of Russia, now hailed as Europe's saviour. Don Cossacks bivouacked on the Champs-Élysées. Allied troops generally behaved well. "35 miles away, Napoleon was at Fontainebleau with 36,000 men, all of them hungry and exhausted after their 100-mile forced march. Nevertheless, Napoleon began planning an immediate advance on Paris. But for the first time, he faced unanimous opposition from his ministers and marshals, including Ney, MacDonald, Oudinot, and Berthier. They reminded him of his oath to act for the good of France. He accused them of disloyalty, acting only to save themselves.
Wow.
They told him the war was lost, and he must abdicate in favour of his son if possible. On the 4th of April, Marshal Marmont surrendered his entire corps to the coalition, which was marched over to the enemy lines against the wishes of many of its officers and men. This was a devastating blow to Napoleon, and encouraged the Allies to reject his offer of a conditional abdication in favour of his son. 2 days later, he abdicated without conditions. The Allied powers having proclaimed that the Emperor Napoleon is the only obstacle to the re-establishment of peace in Europe, the Emperor Napoleon, faithful to his oath, declares that he renounces for himself and his heirs the thrones of France and Italy, and that there is no personal sacrifice, including his life, that he is not ready to make in the interests of France. Napoleon's abdication was formalized by the Treaty of Fontainebleau, by which he was allowed to keep the title of emperor, become sovereign of the small island of Elba, and retain a bodyguard of 400 men. News came too late to prevent Wellington's attack on Toulouse, leading to a costly and pointless battle, with more than 7,000 casualties.
For any of the British subscribers, they might know about this kind of battle, but anyone who doesn't know, about this time was the war of in America was the War of 1812, which, bless you, was the War of 1812, which was the War of America in versus the British. And I think that's a big reason why you don't see the British so much, because of course they were fighting us, which is a common thing that we seem to have loved to do against each other for 2 wars, and then a bunch of petty things. I'm not saying they're at fault. I'm not saying we're at fault. I'm saying we were both at fault. Collectively, we were both stupid. I love you, England, UK. But this battle reminds me of, and I bring this up, I'm sure the British, as I said, I'm sure the British know. I'm double speaking because of the alcohol. Let me take a drink real fast to clear my mind. I think it was the Battle of New Orleans. Andrew Jackson. This was 1815. Now, this is a year later, but I'm not going by years. I'm just going by the worthlessness of that battle. The treaty, what was it? The Treaty of Ghent? Was it the Treaty of Ghent was signed? Excuse me. And that pretty much ended the war of 1812 between the British and the Americans. And I think it was, as you know, back in these days, communications weren't exactly handled through your Google Pixel phone. It was letters. And so Andrew Jackson and his band of men took up to defend New Orleans against the British. The British did not know the war had ended, and they attacked a strong point that Andrew Jackson had, and I don't remember the count, but it was something ridiculous, like 7 Americans killed and 150 wounded, compared to thousands of British soldiers killed. Because we had the high position, the defense dug in, and they were like charging up a hill, and we had obstacles in their way. Imagine, minus the beach scene, but kind of imagine like a D-Day scenario, but going uphill. And the British, overconfident, ran right into it, and they died. But I bring this up not to make light of it, because a lot of people died that shouldn't have died. But the battle was over. The war was over. That battle should have never taken place. And if you kind of think about it, that battle taking place after the war was officially over, but both sides not quite knowing, you would have never had someone like Andrew Jackson. Someone like Andrew Jackson. I got 2 books right here. As you can plainly see, book 2, and then there's, well, you can't see that, but there's book 3. My man here, Andy Jackson, would not have become the person that we Old Hickory might not have become president because of that battle. So, what are you looking at, you little punk? I'm Joe. He might still have become president, but that battle really kind of secured his future. So I mean, it's things like this I can totally relate to, because these are things that should not have happened. I'm gonna finish this off so I can go eat, because 3 beers.
The night after his abdication, Napoleon tried to commit suicide, using the poison that had been made for him in Russia in case of capture.
I didn't know that.
But it had lost its potency, and he survived. Wow. 2 weeks later, Napoleon bade farewell to his old guard at Fontainebleau Palace, and began his journey into exile.
Why wasn't his wife and kid forced to exile with him? Or was that not a common thing back then?
The Napoleonic Wars, which had raged on land and sea for 11 years, seemed finally at an end. The death toll is unknown, but historians estimate that 2 to 3 million lives were lost across Europe. Most soldiers died not in battle, but from disease. Many thousands were left maimed and disfigured. For most of this period, Napoleon was master of Europe, imposing treaties on humbled enemies, redrawing frontiers, overthrowing old regimes, and making new kings. He was the last figure in history to combine total political power with frontline military genius, in the mold of Alexander and Caesar. But it seemed Napoleon's reign was to end in abject military defeat. However, exile on Elba did not prove to Napoleon's taste. In less than 10 months, he would return to France to fight one last great campaign to reclaim his throne.
didn't mean to slam it that hard. I've been drinking. I apologize. I just saw Waterloo this morning is on YouTube. And I said before in one of the videos it was 3 hours. It's not. It's like 2 hours and 13 minutes. This weekend is 4th of July weekend, so I'm off Monday. So to any Americans, happy 4th of July. Hope you have a great weekend. Barbecue, eating terrible food for you that's not healthy. You know, it's the American way. It is what we do. Drink responsibly. I certainly haven't. I've had 3 beers in the past like 50 minutes. It's not responsible at all. I would pour more in here, but I need ice. Because, you know, that's my excuse. But, yeah, I forgot what I was going to say. I've been drinking. I apologize. Yeah, I'm going to end this here. Oh, what was I saying? YouTube. Yeah. I'm going to see the Waterloo. I think that's the last one for me to see for the videos. I think there is a Waterloo video. I don't know how long it is, so I'll definitely check that one out. But I want to check out the Waterloo movie. Napoleon is interesting. Napoleon is an interesting character for me. I've never really looked into him much. It's very interesting. Difference between, I'm a George Washington fan. I don't know if you can tell. For the people who don't know, this is his replica musket pistol. There's his little bust. I'm a big fan of Mount Vernon. I've been there 3 times. I would go there once a week if I could, but I don't live there. I love it. I could just walk around there all the time, but I'm just a big Washington turned me on to history. That sounded weird, but he kind of sparked a light bulb, sparked a match, he turned on the light bulb. Shut up. You know what I'm saying. And I know there's some people who compare Napoleon to Washington. I can tell you that in terms of military, there's no comparison. Napoleon, hands down, he's considered the greatest military general of all time. Washington was 3-9 in his victory, in his battles. Washington did not have the ability that Napoleon did. Washington wanted to. He didn't. There were 2 different kinds of leaders. Washington was a better, I'd say, overall leader. Napoleon was a better military. I don't want to say this in a rude way. He was a better military kind of dictator. And Washington was a better president kind of person. What the hell are you doing? Washington was a better... He wasn't necessarily better to get people to fight under him. I told you about Charles Lee. That was just one incident. Washington was not a great military strategist. He really wanted to be. He wanted to be a British subject and learn through their military like his brother Lawrence. But he just wasn't that guy. But he was a better... I think he was more willing to see his failures and to promote people that were better than him in these aspects. That's why we have people like John Adams. That's why, and I'm talking about America. That's why we have John Adams. That's why we have Thomas Jefferson. That's why we have James Madison, James Monroe to a certain aspect. That's why we have Alexander Hamilton. Benjamin Franklin was already around. No disrespect to you, Benjamin. I got a Benjamin Franklin book right there. You can't really see. But that's why we have people like John Jay, the first Supreme Court Chief Justice. Not going to mention about the Supreme Court now. But we have a lot of people that he elevated. And these were still good people. But he elevated them because they, in terms of his cabinet, they were very bright people. And I don't see Napoleon willing to do that. so much. I think that he looked at nepotism first, and second were people that, yeah, maybe they were good military commanders and generals, but I don't think he wanted anyone that would have outshined him. Does that make sense? I'm kind of ranting here. I think this might have been an hour, and this is certainly not what I wanted it to be. So I apologize for the length, but I'm going to go ahead and end it here because my dogs are looking at me and they're hungry also. I need some more ice so I can drink some more alcohol. All right? So I'm going to jump right into another video after this, but in the meantime, you won't know that. So have a good day, have a good night.